Hey guys, I wanted to show you an example of how I edit this fireworks photo. This goes along with a blog post called How to Photograph Fireworks with a Neutral Density Filter, or something like that. There'll be a link to the article in the blog if you want to know more about that, but I just wanted to show the editing process for one of these. So you might notice this is a little dark. That's because I shot it with a 6-stop neutral density filter. And for more about how to do that and why, check out the blog post. But basically it darkens your lens so you can get much longer exposures, get a lot more fireworks bursts in one shot. This is a 46-second exposure at ISO 100 and f5. So here's how I would edit that. And just to start off with, the baseline for all good editing is going to be to shoot in RAW. That is going to allow us to bring the most detail out of this photo, and if you need to know more about that, I've got a blog article about that too. But if you're not sure if you're shooting in RAW or JPEG, you're shooting in JPEG. So if you want to find out more about that, then check out the blog post. Okay, so first thing I would do here, this is the raw image right out of camera. And this is obviously way too dark. We need to see if we can save this and make it brighter. So I am going to lift up the shadows. And the reason I could have left this exposure running longer, it's just they had this low break here, and I just wanted to make sure to not ruin the image because I wasn't totally sure, and I really wanted to catch that. So that was an accidental low break there. Everyone was okay, but it looked really cool. So first thing I'm going to do is lift up the shadows, and I'm probably not going to leave them that high, but just to get started I need to up the shadows and lift the exposure just so I can kind of see what's going on here. Okay, so as we can see, even though this was shot at ISO 100, there's still a lot of noise. That's because first of all it was very dark and we were trying to pull a lot of light out, and then also it's because it was 46-second exposure. So that's going to be too much noise, but that just kind of gives me an idea. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring the shadows is bringing out the dark areas, exposures lightening the entire image. So I'm just going to kind of leave it like that for now. All the time on my fireworks photos, I'm going to drop the highlights. That's what's going to bring the detail back here. So now in a JPEG file, that would not probably be recoverable, but the camera saves a lot more of the information if you shoot in RAW. So that's why we're able to drop the highlights and recover all that. I don't want it too dark because it's fireworks. We want them to be bright. So I just put the highlights at exactly where they start to blow out, but not any brighter. And, you know, I adjust that based on also adjusting the exposure and the shadows. So I'm going to actually bring the exposure up a little more. I'm bringing this brightness up as much as I can without starting to see the noise in the sky. So it looks like maybe even a little, oh, see, now we start to see it there. So I'm going to drop that exposure, or I can drop the shadows, bring the exposure up a little more. That actually works better. Okay, I'm going to actually even drop those highlights a little more now. There we go. So now this kind of cloudiness in the middle here, that can be taken care of with the dehaze button. So I can just maybe add about, I don't know, about 15 there. That helps that a little bit. The other thing that helps that a little bit is a little bit of contrast. And so that's good for that. Now the first thing I'm going to drop these shadows a little more. I'm still seeing a little noise there. Okay. Now I still would like this area to be brighter, but I don't want to raise the shadows on the whole thing because we're bringing too much noise out of the sky. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use one of these graduated filters. And I'm just going to put my cursor there, pull that up from the bottom. Now it won't always be lightening like this. It's whatever settings you had last. I just already had it where the last thing I did was I lifted the shadows, so it defaulted to that. But you should always, you know, you can always check and make sure it's at 0. So right there, there's nothing affected. If you hover over here, that red will show you what area of the image is being affected. So I might even pull that down a little bit so we don't go into the sky. Now I am going to lift the shadows a little bit to bring out some more detail, maybe even a little exposure, and get some more detail there. Okay, so and maybe even a little clarity to kind of make it pop. Okay, it's even maybe a little too much. Okay, So we are done with this. I don't know why I've lost my done buttons, but usually there's a button right here that says done, but just, I don't know. And I've had enough of trying to like figure out various things today. So, but you can also click on each of these to just say done after you're done using them. That works too. So that's what we're doing right now. Okay, so now the next thing I notice about this is that it is too yellow. It's too warm, and this happens a lot with fireworks photography. I shoot in auto white balance everything, and I geek out on a lot of things. White balance is not one of them, because if you shoot in RAW, you can change your white balance later in post-processing, and I find most of the time the camera gets it right on auto, and I don't have to think too much about it when I'm shooting. But if you're shooting in JPEG, white balance is something that you need to get right in camera, because it's not as easy to change afterward. So now, so all I'm going to do is I'm just going to bring this temperature slider more towards the blue. Most of the time in fireworks photography, I have to do this. I don't know, the camera's not as good with it in auto. And then also add that to the fact that these Okaloosa Island fireworks, the pier here, has these yellow lights. They're great for the turtles, but photographers are not a huge fan other than that. Of course, you know, we're happy to have them there for the turtles, but we need to deal with those in post-processing. So just changing the temperature a little more blue helps with that. And so I think that temperature looks good now. Okay, the only thing I would do now is add a little more clarity on the whole image, because now we're affecting the whole image. Now, I don't normally add vibrance and saturation to my images, believe it or not, but I'm going to add it here, because night photography is usually pretty colorful anyway, but for this image, I'm going to add a little bit of both. Vibrance adds more blues and greens, and saturation saturates every color in the image. So that just makes it a little more colorful, I think. I'm actually going to bump the exposure just a little bit. It still looks a little dull to me. Next thing I look at is the histogram. This shows you if you have a black point and a white point in the image. It just means you have a good spread of dynamic range. I'm showing that this triangle would be lit up if I had a white point, and I don't. So I'm going to just pull these whites over. What that's going to do is just make sure that there's a true white in the image, and so it just brightened up the things that are almost white to make them true white. Okay, so now we're looking good. And I think that's almost all I would do to this image. Now at the very end, what I like to do, first of all, I always sharpen the image. I pretty much always put this right around 100. Masking just is basically putting a mask on whatever you're sharpening. So like for night photography, you just want it to be sharpening the places with the detail. We don't need to sharpen the noise in the sky. So I usually put that around 25. That's usually good for me. Okay, luminance, noise reduction, all my images get this. Usually about 20, but a little more if it's super noisy or something, but that's fine for this. All it does is soften the noise in the image. Okay, so now a lot of people would leave this like this and say, done. We're not going to do that, because the last thing I do is I crop. And sometimes I do it first, but most of the time I do it last. Almost all my stuff now is cropped into a 4:5. Not everything, but I just find that it displays the best on Instagram, and one of the hardest things for photographers to accept is that most people are viewing their content on a mobile phone now, and this is going to display better on a mobile phone in a vertical crop, so I tend to shoot that way now. I still shoot some stuff horizontal because that's more popular with prints, but for the stuff I display online, it's going to be mostly vertical now. And then I do a 4:5 crop. Now, even so, a lot of people would leave this, they would leave it cropped, you know, more like that or something. But I don't do that. More so than a lot of photographers I know, I just tend to really, really crop in. I believe in filling the frame, getting the most impact, and to me, I crop out every single thing I can. I leave anything that does not need to be there gets cropped out. So, and I always make sure my horizon is straight. But like in like this right here, this clutter here, this beach fence or whatever, and all this stuff, if that was not being cropped out in the crop, I would take this into Photoshop and get it out there. To me, that's just clutter. That doesn't need to be there. I don't like clutter, distractions. And for me, just, we don't need all this other extra space. That's just distracting from the main point and taking away from the impact. So I am going to crop it right there. And see, to me, that's just more impactful with that crop. So that is, I don't think that horizon looks quite straight. It's hard to tell in the dark, but that's what I look for, is the horizon to be pretty much straight. A lot of people get out the ruler tool and go all that. I don't know. I just eyeball it. Okay, so that is it. We're done with this image. I really don't do much editing to my fireworks photography because I would rarely go into Photoshop for this or anything, because the main thing is to get it right in camera, and then you don't have to do as much editing afterward. And getting it right in camera means knowing your fundamentals of shooting in manual, getting your settings right, and shooting in RAW. So, and I will have a lot more of that stuff upcoming on the blog because I love fundamentals. But anyway, hope you found this helpful. Again, this will be a supplement to a blog post on my site, so if you want to know more about using an ND filter to get your fireworks all crazy like this, then check out the blog and let me know if this is helpful on the blog comments or Instagram or wherever you want to find me, and let me know. All right. Thank you. Have a good night.